I'm excited to announce that roughly after 4 weeks, my new revamped website is up and running, philsvitek.com. You can check it out. Now, more importantly for you, I want to share, the last step in the process, the macro overview of how to design a website, whether from scratch or if you're doing a revamp like I did. And by the way, if you've missed the earlier steps, as this is step 4, you can check those out. I've linked to in the description to the entire playlist of all the steps. But just to summarize, step 1 is about outlining the entire website. In a Word document, you take all your thoughts and you literally, design it. What's the text? What are the different pages? Things like that, the structure of it all. In step 2, it's translating that into the website in just a very rudimentary draft form, so you can kind of start to see, what goes where, and where there's too much text, too little text, yada yada yada, right? Just very cursory, basic. Step 3 is starting to finesse that to get it to have the visual flair that you're looking for, right? And step 4 is really the cleanup and getting it over the finish line. Now, the kind of paradoxical aspect of it is that this step might actually be the longest. So even though from a technical standpoint, it might be the least amount of work, because you're at that point where it's like, now it's all the hard stuff, the final get it over that finish line. It's like when you're a runner, that last stretch of it, like you just hit this wall and it becomes so much harder. And that's what this is. It's really going through the minutia of everything and testing out all the hyperlinks, right? Making sure that it's all working the way that it's supposed to. Any contact forms are actually, emailing the way they're supposed to, right? That you're receiving the actual emails. If you have an e-commerce side to it, that's all properly going where you're actually receiving the money and the people are, gonna get the order, all that stuff, right? So it's just cleanup and checking everything. And the thing of it is, you can work with a developer or you can, work on this by yourself. It all depends on your comfort level and your knowledge. But regardless, even if you work with a developer, I would say for this last part especially, you really want to essentially check their work. Like if you tell them like, hey, anytime you see a buy now button, let's say you have that it goes to, this, and that it opens up a new tab if it's taking people away from the website, right? Like just a very simple thing that you would have. What you would want to do is make sure that is the case. Like even if you tell them that thing, you want to double check that work. And this all applies regardless of what website you're working on. Wix, Squarespace, WordPress. WordPress happens to be what I'm very familiar with and have been utilizing. But again, this methodology applies to everything. And there's tons of fantastic tutorials out there about each of these platforms. But what I found is that there's not that macro view of it all. And so that's what kind of this whole series has been about. Now, I just want to sort of highlight the challenges that I ran up against as far as, getting my website over the finish line, just to highlight, various things and, perhaps inspire you of how to overcome them if you face the same ones or similar ones, right? Now, let me also kind of say my website overall, because I have this knowledge of how to build websites, right? And I've done it multiple times. Mine's a little bit more involved, right? I wanted to showcase all kinds of things with my website, my films, my books, these lessons that I put out, of course, the ways people can work with me. I even last minute added an altruism tab that highlights the various causes that are near and dear to me. My bio, of course, ways to get in touch with me, and resources that, I stand by that have tremendously helped me, right? So it's a lot more than I think is needed for most artists. In fact, especially if you're starting off, I would just keep it very, very simple of here's who I am and what I do, and here's how you contact me, right? If you just had those 3 things, boom, you're solid, right? But all the same, I just wanted to kind of highlight these things. So number 1, the contact form. these can actually get a little bit tricky, believe it or not. I mean, there's plenty of plugins and software that account for this, but each is a little bit nuanced. So you want to make sure you go through the various tutorials and make sure it's up and running in the way that you need it to. So for me, there was like WP Forms that was very popular, but I decided to go with this plugin called Ninja Forms, and it's just a little bit more conducive to what I would like it to do and incorporates many things. So, surprisingly, the contact form can actually trip up some people, especially if you're trying to, like for me, the big thing of it was, the services that I offered, right? So it wasn't just a simple, name and email and comment type of thing. It was also if people wanted to hire me for the various services. So that's why it was a little bit more involved. But all the same, if you just apply the basics, once you learn and pick one, you can get through it. Number 2, so for me, and this has been a big hurdle for a number of years, it's very easy to embed a single YouTube video. Not so easy to embed a YouTube playlist, okay? And, it kind of gives you, like, take an embed code, but it still comes up as a single video that then, people can essentially play on autoplay in that way, but it's not the same, right? Like, you want each of those individual videos, but without having to populate it, so forth. Now, the good part is plugins like this actually exist, and I found one that, like, really works well, but the amazing part is, like, this plugin would have been so great for me, like, just so many years ago, but a lot of things just take time to develop, and I'm glad and very appreciative that such a thing exists. And a lot of times, sometimes the thing that you specifically need may not be there quite yet, but regardless, it's all about just kind of figuring out the best solution and literally just Googling all these questions. How do I embed a YouTube playlist into a WordPress website, right? And oftentimes, the answers that I was getting for many, many years was just a single sort of video embed type of thing. But now there's answers in. And so if you're not quite getting the answer that you need, keep digging, keep searching, keep revising that prompt into Google until you get the answer that you're looking for. Now, it may, as I said, it may not exist quite yet, at which point, okay, you might have to be like, well, it is what it is, but don't give up so easily. Keep, like, refining how you word it to try to get to that answer. Another big thing for me, and I think all of us should really have, is a responsive website. So what a responsive website means is that it looks good on any device. So, on a computer, on a tablet, as well as mobile. And this can, a lot of these platforms take that into account already, but still sometimes, things get funky. And so the big thing of this step especially, you want to be testing out your website on all these platforms. Once you update the change, what does it look like on mobile? What does it look like on a website? And by the way it looks on a 13-inch screen, MacBook Air or whatever, versus your home desktop could be a little bit different. So all these things you want to kind of take into account and be looking at it just to, triple, quadruple check that it looks pristine as it does. So keep that into account. Next up, for me, as you design the website, you kind of might create stuff that looks good on a certain web page. And then, as you're kind of working on their web page, it looks good here, blah, blah, blah. And then when you kind of take that step back, as in this particular portion of it, you start to see inconsistencies. And that's not good, right? You want your website to be overall streamlined. And so in this step in particular, you got to ask yourself, okay, what are the things that, I can kind of make sense? And sometimes it's good to have something look different, right? If you want to draw attention to it. But overall, you want to ask yourself, what needs to be changed, what needs to be taken out completely, so that way there's a flow to it, and people at the end of the day know that, yeah, that your website is clear and concise, and there's a flow to it, right? It's not jarring. You don't want a jarring experience with your website. Now, the next step is, this might be a little bit involved, and it might not be you, and it's really this part of it. Like if you do use a developer, it might be a little bit hard to check in this way, but you want to make sure that you're optimizing the web page so that way it's as fast as it can be, right? And so it's getting rid of stuff that is superfluous to it. So anytime like you have elements, it just bogs it down. So in the case of WordPress, in terms of what I'm utilizing, so I have this thing called Elementor, which is a free thing. There's a paid version of it too, but there's also a free, very powerful version. And there's these things called containers versus sections. And sections take up more time because they allow you more control. You can have multiple columns and things like that. But if you just need something like basic text on the page, then that would be a container, right? And so you start to learn these things, and you just kind of want to clean it up as much as you can, or ask your developer to make sure it's as optimized. Now, we're talking milliseconds, most times, but especially if you have a long web page with a lot of photos and things like that, it can add up, right? And, speaking of images in particular, what I would say, you want to make sure that you have some sort of backend, usually a plugin, that is able to compress images, so that way, because a lot of times the images that people end up seeing on our website are the small versions. Now, they usually can click it and a light box comes up. A light box is this thing that makes the picture bigger, and see it that way, right? So the thing of it there would be that on the web page itself, it gets loaded as the small image, much faster load time as opposed to like a 3 megabyte file. But when they click it, that's when it loads the larger image, right? So again, these are things that save time to load the web page and make the user experience that much better, so they're not frustrated as to why this page is loading slowly, and being like, I'm done with this, I don't want to be a part of this, right? The big thing for me was also integrating my newsletter, philsvitek.substack.com, into this. I really want to lean into this more, and so it was about taking that and embedding it in a good way, right? And part of that is making sure it had a uniform look with the rest of the website, right? Because by default, the way it looks, it's kind of like orangey, or you can go with the green vibe, stuff like that. Whereas my website is, black, white, gray. And so I wanted to kind of have that and properly incorporated. And, here you're just kind of going through, and as I said, in step 3, you might have just thrown in the embed code there. But the way, like on my website, for instance, I already say like, stay looped in on the creative journey, and then I have a description and stuff like that. And so if I just embedded the default code and the default settings of what Substack provided me, it would have been redundant. Now you would have like my write-up of it that I wanted it to say, as well as the defaults of Substack. And so within Substack, I had to alter the options to just select, hey, I just literally just want this box for people to subscribe, because I already have the rest, right? And you can do that, but it takes time, and you got to just make sure of all that stuff. So now I mentioned a little bit earlier, but I added a page for altruism. For me, I take a holistic view. I call myself a 360 creative coach. And, I really love the website, but the thing of it was, it just felt like something was missing. I'm part of the Financially Fit Foundation, which is a nonprofit that educates people on finances and really gaining control of their financial life, right? And I didn't find an organic way to kind of write about that in anything else. So it felt missing. It felt like a chunk of me was missing. But not only that, it's not just about the Financially Fit Foundation. It's also about the other causes near and dear to my heart. I always talk about artists. We can't divorce ourselves of the world. We have to be a part of it. And I know I'm ranting about this, but it does really feel special for me. And it was like literally the last addition to it. I was like, I need to add this page to it because it's me, right? It felt like that. And the funny part is, in my haste, I created it, and one of the things that once you start getting these things consistent, you can copy and paste elements generally from a previous page, like you're essentially building templates, right? And so I had taken everything from the various other pages that I built and created this altruism page, so it was very quick. Now the thing of it was still looking weird for some reason, not in a terrible way, but just it had padding on the bottom, between the bottom of the page and the footer, as well as the header, and though very small and no one would have complained, it was just driving me nuts. And so this is, again, going back to kind of just making sure everything is consistent throughout, right? And it ended up being a very small thing where the web page layout was just different than everything else, right? And so as soon as I changed that to be consistent with everything else, boom, problem solved, and we're off to the races. But that's a big thing, right? Even for me, a thing that I really made sure was that all the colors were consistent as far as, if there was sections that needed to be white, and it had a white background, I made sure that it was the same white throughout. If I needed a light gray, I made sure that was throughout, even if it was just slightly different. I just really wanted everything to be as consistent as possible. So, that took up a lot of time to make sure that that was 100% boom, good to go. And also what they call gaps, and or padding rather. And padding essentially means, how much distance is there between the content and, what's next to it, right? Above it, to the left of it, to the right of it, and so forth. And a big part of this was making sure that I had that consistent from start to finish. So that took a big chunk of the time, and this is the part where you just put on music or you put on a background TV show, because it's sort of mindless work, but you have to kind of do it. And the thing for me, I went back right when we talk about mobile devices and having it be good anywhere. What I was finding was that on a website, it looked great. But then on mobile, it's not that it didn't look bad, but the words kept going all the way to the edge. Is it the worst thing in the world? No, not necessarily. But it did make it harder to read, right? And so that irked me, because I want people to have the easiest experience. And so by changing the padding to be, 10 and 10, on the left and the right, it gave a small enough space on both sides where it allowed people to read it so much easier, right? And so I made sure that that was consistent throughout the entire website. And as I said, mine's a little bit more involved. It's technically 15 pages worth of, stuff. For you, as I said, you can even have just a simple landing page of, here's who you are, a sizzle reel, a quick bio, and a contact, and that's it, right? Or you can split up into pages if you want. Again, much more simplified than what I certainly went for. The big thing too, talking about images and stuff like that, is overall you want to have those things templated, right? So on each of my web pages, I had the header or the hero image the same, right? As far as dimensions. So I had that. I had various photos of people that I utilize and highlight, or pictures to showcase of, my past that are featured in my bio page. So all these things, you want to look at the various types of images that you're going to be using, and you want to make sure that it is consistent throughout, right? So whether you use Photoshop, Canva, or Pixlr, any photo imaging software, I would recommend putting it through there, so that way you have the same dimensions for all of this, and it makes it so much easier. And this is the part where you really want to finalize all your actual assets. And I talked about with step 3 for me, Part of it was, you know, in the earlier steps, I just had placeholders for a lot of this stuff. And part of step 3 into step 4 for me was making sure that I compiled all the final assets that I was going to utilize in all these steps, right? So, so that's another big one. And, you know, as I said, sometimes you're just making adjustments on the fly. So, speaking of like images, there was sections on the website, and there still are, where I highlight people I work with, right, in various capacities, you know, on my films, people I collaborate with on their projects and stuff like that. And there was a template I had made on my films page that highlights the directors that are my inspiration. But the thing of it is, there's only 6 directors highlighted, and it looks good for that. Whereas for my creative partners, there was a lot more that I was featuring, and utilizing that template, it just became too bulky. Right? It could have worked, but it didn't please me visually. So I switched it up and made it more compact and things like that. And so it's a different design, right? So this is a step in that whole process where you're really assessing and kind of being like, okay, here was the initial idea. It's not working the way as intended. What ways can I alter it? And be still consistent throughout. So even though to me, like, it works, right? So if you go onto my filmography page, you'll see the filmmakers that have inspired me, and that feels separate and needs to be unique versus the other stuff, you know, is showcasing something different. So it's okay to have that distinction, at least in my eyes. So again, these are all the various choices that you're having to sort of make in this step, and just getting it over that finish line overall. Now, the big kind of hurdle, especially if you're doing a revamp, you want to make sure for this last step, especially, that, you know, if you're building, most likely you would be building on a staging environment, right? Meaning it's not the live website. That way the live website is still up and running and nothing is broken with it. And you can test out and, you know, go funky with this new version, right? And just try things out. And if they work, they work. If they fail, it's okay, because you can fix it. And it's, you know, it doesn't affect the live version. When you're ready, you know, this is where especially you would want a developer, if you're not skilled in this way, to make sure that, you know, nothing is broken. So you would essentially need to copy that staging environment into the live website. And if you, the thing of it is, you don't want to break any links that you had in the past, because that messes with your SEO. And then, you know, as far as Google, right? Like if they were searching and you're getting a lot of hits based on something, all of a sudden if that link is broken, that's not good for you. So this last part really is the most technical. Now, if you're building a website completely from scratch, that's fine. You don't have to worry about that as much. You know, you just kind of hit the go live button on your hosting platform, essentially, and that's it. But the good news is, there's, for all of this stuff, right, as you bump your head, you know, Fiverr, Upwork are all great freelance resources for you. As I said, for me, Google, and especially YouTube videos, like, you know, for this, you know, small specific stuff, is a great resource. If you are utilizing WordPress, I'm going to link to a full tutorial that really helped me in my process. I mean, I'll be honest, I literally only watched like 30 minutes of it, because it gave me, you know, based on what I already know, it gave me enough where I'm like, oh, okay, I know exactly what I need to do with this. But you're welcome to watch, I mean, it's a 4-hour tutorial, so very detailed. Now, if you are using WordPress and need a little bit more help, there is Codeable.io. This is for WordPress specifically, and they are vetted developers. Now, because of that, the cost is a little bit higher, but I will say the benefit of that is you can post, you know, what you're looking for, and then everybody bids on it, right? And the cost that it ends up being is, you know, it's not like one person gives you one bid and another person gives you a lower bid and so forth. It actually averages out what most people would want to bid for that, and then you just get to select, you know, even if it's like the one that like initially had the highest bid, you can hire them because it averages out the bid, and, you know, so you're paying them for that. So yeah, there's multiple ways of getting over the finish line. But as I said, just keep it simple if you're just starting off. you don't need to go for the grand vision. You can build towards that as you get more comfortable. Just, if nothing else, this whole thing has been about empowering you to just go out and create a website. I think all artists do need a website, and simple is fine, totally. So I hope everything that I've spoken about in these 4 episodes has resonated, and more importantly, has helped. As always, if you have any questions or thoughts of your own, please comment down below or hit me up on social media at Svitek. As I said, this is not like a step-by-step guide of how to do the website, because there's plenty of tutorials on that. I just wanted to give you the macro because I often find that is overlooked. So get to it, and I hope this helps.